Okay, Mr. Murillo, are we live?
Yes, we are.
Okay. And we have opened it up to the community.
Yes.
Okay. Good evening to our community members. My name is Hansel Aguilar. I am the Director of Police Accountability for the City of Berkeley. We thank you for tuning in tonight. We have our second installment tonight of our use of force forums. Just bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and share our screen. Okay. And are we there, Mr. Murillo? Our share screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So tonight's discussion is going to be on accountability and transparency. Again, just a gentle reminder of how we got here. The use of force policy for the Berkeley Police Department requires an annual review that is done with the Police Accountability Board. And the Police Accountability Board at their retreat earlier this year asked the Office of the Director of Police Accountability, our office, to assist them in doing a review. So our office, as part of our review, we're inviting community members going over different segments of the policy. We broke this up into 3 forum sessions. Last time we were talking about de-escalation. Today, we're talking about accountability and transparency. So tonight is Monday, September 9th, 2024, and we do understand we might have some competition with some seasonal events, sporting events, but we thank you for tuning in tonight, or if you're rewatching this, for rewatching this forum. So if we can see on the screen, we're gonna, this is our agenda for tonight. We're going to do some gentle staff introductions. We did the full introductions last time, and we'll discuss our overview on the use of force policy tonight. That'll be pertinent to tonight's forum theme. And we'll do a review activity of different ways community members can uh, assist in bringing forth concerns regarding use of force and expanding transparency. We'll have some reflections, some public comments, and closing remarks. I just wanted to acknowledge again the great work that was done by our summer intern, Chloe Park, UC Cal student. She assisted us in organizing our thoughts behind these forums. So we have her to thank for this organization tonight. Also, our hardworking staff. We introduce our investigator, Keegan Horton, who's present with us today. Mr. Jose Murillo, who's assistant, is our policy analyst. Our administrative analyst was present last time, Ms. Melanie Beasley. And we have today Dr. D, who's a temporary addition to our team and assisting us in some very specific projects, Dr. Dila Morris. And we have our second investigator, Jason Wechter, who we didn't have the opportunity to present last time. So we're just going to allow some brief time for him to introduce himself to the community.
How do I unmute myself? Thank you, Hansel. I'm Jason Wechter. I'm an investigator. I've been working here since May 2023. I previously worked for similar oversight entities in Oakland and San Francisco. So thank you.
Thank you, Jason. So let's get down and get started with our particular topic for tonight. Again, we're having a discussion on accountability and transparency, and that it involves the reporting requirements and processes. So just to pull out the specific sections that we'll be discussing tonight, again, BPD policy on use of force is BPD policy 300. The particular sections we'll discuss tonight fall in point 6 and point 7. So officers under that policy must document all uses of force instances per policy 300.6. There's also a supervisor review, supervisor responsibilities and internal reviews, discusses the role of supervisors in response to use of force, gathering facts and reviewing body-worn camera footage. That's in 300.6.1, and there's several transparency measures that are codified not only the Berkeley Police Department policy, but also in the post guidelines, also within our city charter, in what our reporting requirements are as an oversight body and what we report out to the community on an annual basis. But in BPD's policy, that's found in 300.11 or 11, quarterly and annual analysis of use of force incidents, demographic details, and public reporting. Now I'll turn it over to our policy analyst, who will just go over some of the resources we provided last time.
Thank you, Director Aguilar. Good evening, everyone. Before we dive into the policy that Director Aguilar mentioned earlier, we just want to provide a few key resources that we covered last time that will really help facilitate and continue the conversation today. First of all, as we covered last week, the effects of AB 392 on the police officer use of force standards. Then, of course, there's the FLETC talks, the Graham v. Connor, which covers important case law related to use of force. And of course, there's the Berkeley Transparency Hub, where the Berkeley Police Department reports on the use of force instances, which we'll be talking about further tonight or later tonight. And of course, the full complete policy can be found in the link shown on the screen for BPD policy, the use of force, which is covered under policy 300. Next slide, please. Again, as we covered last time, as more of a general source of knowledge, Senate Bill 978 requires all California law enforcement agencies to make their policy and training materials public. For the city of Berkeley, you could find the Berkeley Police Department's material on the screen shown, or on the link shown on the screen. Next slide, please. So now we'll be starting with the first section, which is policy 300.6, reporting requirements. This policy states that all use of force shall be documented promptly, completely, and accurately in an appropriate report, depending on the nature of the incident and the level of force used. And we'll be covering more on the 4 levels of forces later on in this presentation. It further states that the officer should articulate the factors perceived and why they believe the use of force was objectively reasonable and objectively necessary under the circumstances. Again, we get back to the point and the topic that we covered last week, or not last week, during the last presentation, about what it means for force to be reasonable and objectively necessary. The policy further goes on to state whether an officer or an employee uses the pepper spray, they must also complete, in terms of use of pepper spray reports specifically within our policy, whether an officer or employee use the body strap or spit hood restraint devices. There must also be another special report. And of course, the document, review, and report any such uses in accordance to section 300.11, which we'll cover later on. It further states that upon receiving notification of a use of force, an uninvolved supervisor, when feasible, shall determine the level of force, reporting level, investigation, documentation, and review requirements.
And Mr. Murillo, if I could just stop here, I want to emphasize a point that we'll be discussing throughout tonight, is that there are both internal and external mechanisms regarding accountability and transparency. So in here, we're reporting requirements. It requires that all use of force to be documented promptly by the officers, but then it will also see other internal mechanisms like the supervisor review, and then also further mechanisms like community members bringing forth complaints and concerns on what could be inappropriate use of force.
Thank you, Director. And we can proceed to the next slide. Okay. So one of those internal factors, as the director mentioned, is the supervisor review, and that falls under policy 300.6.1, which is supervisor responsibility. This section states that a supervisor should respond to any reported use of force if reasonably available. The responding supervisor is expected to perform the following. First requirement is obtain the basic facts from the involved officers, absent an allegation of misconduct or excessive force. This will be considered a routine contact in the normal course of duties. So it's a standard reporting requirement whenever use of force is used in a specific interaction. B is to ensure that any injured parties are examined and treated. Again, community safety and the full sanctity of life doctrine that the city has adopted and our department follows to make sure that at the end of every interaction, everyone is accounted for and is safe. Next slide, please. We have C, once any initial medical assessment has been completed or first aid has been rendered, ensure that photographs have been taken of any areas involving visible injury or complaints of pain, as well as overall photographs of uninjured areas. These photographs should be retained until all potential for civil litigation has expired. Section D states identify any witnesses not already included in related reports and review and approve all related reports. Next slide, please. Okay. Sorry, I lost my place for a second. Okay. And then as part of those responsibilities is to review body-worn camera footage related to the incident. In the event that a supervisor is unable to respond to the scene of an incident involving the reported application of force, the supervisor is still expected to complete as many of the above items that we mentioned as circumstances permit. And then next slide. And now I'll be handing it back to Director Aguilar to walk us through the different levels of use of force.
Okay, again, this is a continuation of some of the commentary we made in last time, and we're also going to have a visual review of how this is reported out through the Transparency Hub. The policy identifies different levels of use of force, and each different level requires different reporting or different ways that each of these different events are reported out. So we have a level 1 use of force incident. That's where the officer used any of the following in the circumstances of the application would lead an objectively reasonable officer to conclude that the subject did not experience more than momentary discomfort. So we have 1, control holds, pain compliance techniques. Number 2, leverage. Number 3, grab. Number 4, body weight. Number 5, the officer lowered the subject to a seated position or to the ground while partially or completely supporting the person's body weight. Number 6, we have takedown. If the incident fits parameters for level 1 incident, the supervisor will enter all applicable data into the BPD's blue team template with a brief summary. Now, it is important to re-emphasize a point that we saw in the previous slide, and I'll go back to it. The metric here to determine how this is reported out is using any of the following in the circumstances of the application would lead an objectively reasonable officer to conclude that the subject did not experience more than momentary discomfort. We do understand that there's different, there might be a disparity between the officer and the community member that's being encountered in terms of different size, weight. So if an officer uses their body weight on somebody that doesn't have their similar body weight, there might be a need for an officer to assess whether there was beyond momentary discomfort. So these are very situational, and it does require the reasonableness of the officer to ensure that they're assessing the situation, the incident, and the person that they're utilizing these techniques on. Now let's discuss level 2. Level 2, it's a no suspect injury or complaint of continuing pain due to interaction with officer. Officer's use of force was limited to the following: firearm drawn from the holster or otherwise deployed during an interaction with an individual and or pointed at an individual. For the purpose of the section, interaction shall be defined as a situation in which an individual could reasonably believe the deployment and or pointing of a firearm could be an attempt to gain compliance. Number 2, control hold, pressure point, leverage, grab, takedown, and or body weight in the application would lead a reasonably objective officer to conclude that the individual may have experienced more than momentary discomfort. And again, one of the things that we emphasized in their last forum was that we wanted to do a verbatim review of the policies so community members could weigh in on what, if anything, in the policy they would like to see different. So this is why we're going through the verbatim review of the policy. So more on the use of force under the level 2. An uninvolved supervisor, when feasible, will respond to the scene and conduct the use of force investigation, ensuring that statements are taken from the suspect and witnesses, and that photos are taken of all involved parties. If the incident fits the parameters for level 2 incident, the supervisor will enter all applicable data into the blue team template with a brief summary. This is where we get some of the community questions, concerns from our office and overall in oversight work. Then community members want to know, did the officers follow what they were supposed to? And when we're reviewing policies, we have to look at whether the language is permissive or whether it's mandatory, or there's certain phrases that could allow for some discretion. So if we're looking at this particular phrasing of the policy in this passage, it says an uninvolved supervisor when feasible. So if a community member has a concern that a uninvolved supervisor didn't respond to the scene to conduct the use of force investigation, and they bring that to our attention, we would try to determine the facts of that encounter and situation and try to determine was it feasible or not, and why did a uninvolved supervisor not attend on the scene. So this is just a point to discuss about where there might be questions about the policy, about what the actions of the officer or the department are when some of these events happen. Let's discuss level 3, which is suspect has sustained an injury or complaints of injury or continuing pain due to an interaction with the officer. B would have otherwise been classified as level 2, except the officer body-worn camera was not activated in a timely manner prior to the enforcement contact per policy. C, the officer used any of the following force options. 1, chemical agents, munitions. 2, impact weapon strikes. And 3, personal body weapons. So again, one important clause in here is the activation of body-worn camera footage. So that is an important note for community members to understand. The officers also have policy and regulation of when body-worn camera footage needs to be activated. And in this particular um, um, criteria, it talks about events that could have been classified or lower, but there was body-worn camera that was not activated in a timely manner per the BPD policy. So an uninvolved supervisor, when practical, will respond to the scene and conduct a use of force investigation, ensuring that statements are taken from the suspect and witnesses. If the incident fits the parameters for a level 3 incident, the supervisor will enter all applicable data into the blue team template. The supervisor will also complete a use of force investigation report narrative in blue team for review through the use of force review process. Suspect and witness statements from the crime report will be attached to the use of force investigation. Now, level 4. This is an incident involving deadly force or any force likely to cause death or serious bodily injury will be investigated under the protocols outlined in policy P12. Some of these policy references are still written in the previous format, and the police department is in an active transition of the old enumeration of the policies into the now Berkeley, the Lexipol policy convention. So that's why you may see some of the policies may have different numbering than we have in our current policies. And these policies are also up on the website that Mr. Murillo referenced in the beginning, and it can be accessed there. Okay. So now it's employee use of force. When a Berkeley Police Department employee has engaged in use of force as defined in this policy, the use of force must be reported to a Berkeley police supervisor and investigated in accordance with this policy. So there is no discretion there. If there's use of force meets the criteria as defined here, they have to report it to the police supervisor, and it will be investigated in accordance with the policy. A says that in the event a use of force as described in level 1, 2, or 3 occurs during an unusual occurrence as described in General Order U4, the officer shall prepare a supplemental report as soon as practical following the incident. B, discuss a little bit more on this. Each officer shall include in the report, to the extent possible, specific information regarding each of use of force, the reason for the use of force, location, description of the individuals upon whom force was used, and type of force used. Again, we'll discuss that a little bit more and provide the visualization of how it's reported out by the Berkeley Police Department in the current moment in their Berkeley, in the Transparency Hub. Mr. Murillo, I want to just take a quick break here. Do we have anything in the Q&A that we need to address in real time before we move on?
Thank you, Director. At this time, we don't have a question that needs to be answered in real time. There is a question currently in the queue that we'll be addressing on later in our presentation tonight. So we do just want to acknowledge that one question and let you know that we do have a brief update and we'll be providing it later in the slide.
Okay, you have a few more slides before I turn it back over to you. Okay, so now public records. Records related to use of force incidents shall be retained and disclosed in compliance with California Penal Code Section 832.7, California Government Code Section 6254F, and Departmental Policy R23. Now, there have been some amendments to these policies, these code sections over the year, which over the last few years, excuse me, which do require now certain records to be released, and that is something that community members should be aware of. And I do want to get back to an important point here. When we discuss use of force, there's a lot of emphasis on what the officer must do when they interact with community members and utilize the force as defined in the policy. But there's actually a very important component to this, something that was brought home to a lot of to society, especially in the U.S., and that is the duty to intercede. It's not necessarily a new concept, but an important one to emphasize that officers do have a duty to intercede when they see any potential excessive or unnecessary use of force. This particular principle is also codified in the Berkeley Police Department use of force policy, and particularly in 300.1.3 core principles. And D says duty to intercede whenever possible. Officers shall intervene when they know or have reason to know that another officer is about to use or is using unnecessary force. Officers shall promptly report any use of unnecessary force and the efforts made to intervene to a supervisor. So we talked a lot about the onus of the officer utilizing the force, about the supervisors, but now we also need to recognize the onus of the other officers that may be on the scene, what they have to do to intervene physically when use of force, an excessive use of force may be occurring, and also their duty to report out that force, unnecessary force, so it can be investigated by the supervisor. These are very important principles to include in any use of force policy. The one of the things that we want to also recognize that these human dynamics are very complicated, and you can't codify your way out of some of these complicated societal issues. And it's important to have clear policies and expectations in writing, but you also do have to recognize the human element and the cultural aspect of how some of these things play out. One of the things we want to uplift is the Berkeley Police Department's their participation in what's called the Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement, or the ABLE project. And that is a very important, I think, new approach that the department is taking to ensure that they are establishing a culture that's going to allow for intervention. When there are not only use of force incidents, but when there are any potential misconduct that needs to be rectified on the scene in real time. And just to give you more background on ABLE, the Active Bystandership for Law Enforcement Project is a national hub for training, technical assistance, and research, all with the aim of creating a police culture in which officers routinely intervene and accept interventions as necessary to prevent misconduct, avoid police mistakes, and promote officer health and wellness. Here, civil rights, we're going to play a video where we're going to hear civil rights advocate Roy Austin describe the potential impact of ABLE on officers in our communities. I do want to report back that a few weeks back, the chair of the Police Accountability Board, Mr. John Chip Moore, and I had the opportunity to travel to the National Organization for Black Law Enforcement Executives, Noble, and we had the opportunity to hear the experiences of other departments that have participated in this ABLE project. And we are, I think I would jointly speak for the chair that we're excited about the promise of what this particular training can do for our department and ensuring that we have a culture of intervention and accountability here. We are also in the process of coordinating with the department to ensure that our Police Accountability Board members have the information about this training that's being provided to our officers. They utilize the train-the-trainer model, so they have as their participation in this project, which we have been discussing for the last few months. If you tune into our Police Accountability Board meetings, the priority is to ensure that the trainers that have been identified by the chief are receiving their training, and now that each officer within the department gets the opportunity to have this ABLE training. So they are in the process of ensuring all officers have it. The board members will also, with coordination with the Berkeley Police Department, have the opportunity to tune in and tap into what this ABLE training can do. Mr. Murillo, are you able to play the video for us?
Yes, just one moment. Okay, can you confirm that we are seeing it on the screen?
We are seeing our, and did you click the share sound? Just making sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Let me just say, first of all, congratulations for your interest, your participation, your desire to learn more about ABLE. That's huge to me. Let me tell you just a little bit about kind of me and why I am involved with this program. So I was raised in State College, Pennsylvania. For any of you who know what that is, it's not College Station and it's not College Park. State College is where Penn State University is. And my dad was a professor of administration of justice, sociology, criminology. In that position, my dad trained people to become police officers. At the same time, my dad would spend time in Rockview Penitentiary teaching prisoners. My own career, I started out in the criminal section of the Civil Rights Division, prosecuting hate crimes and police misconduct cases. And as I tell everybody, the only way that I was able to prosecute police misconduct cases was because I had amazing law enforcement partners in those efforts. I had people who cared so deeply about their profession and the people in their profession and their own jobs and reputations and safety, that they helped me with those prosecutions. I went on to be lucky enough to work with Christy Lopez. And Christy and I worked in New Orleans, first investigating the police department and then moving on to hiring Jonathan and his team at Shepherd Mullen to be the monitors there, as I mentioned before. I want every one of you to understand and for it to be as clear as day that ABLE represents the deepest respect for the law enforcement profession. I believe in ABLE because I don't only want you to do your jobs the best that you possibly can do them, I need you to do your jobs the best that you can possibly do them. Because I know that for myself and for my family, I need to know that I can be safe in my community. And I know the role that law enforcement plays with that. But I also realize that you cannot do your best unless you are at your best. Now, at Facebook, I have this job, Vice President of Civil Rights, which was just created all of 6 months ago. Doesn't exist anywhere else. And as people ask me, what do? I define the job as making sure that Facebook does no harm and making sure that Facebook does good. It's no different for you. It's no different for pretty much hopefully every job. Making sure that my job does no harm, making sure my job does good, making sure that as a police officer, as a sheriff, as a prison guard, as an FBI agent, that I do no harm and that I do good. And when I say do no harm and do good, when it comes to the profession of policing, I'm talking about with respect to yourself. I'm talking about with respect to your partners. I'm talking about with respect to the people who you interact with, your community, yourself, your partners, your community. Do no harm, do good. What do I mean by that? And you've heard this, I'm sure, through this amazing training that I myself have gone through multiple times and worked with multiple officers on. Of course, yourself is, look, you're human. I get it. You have chosen an extraordinarily important profession. But at the end of the day, you're a human being that has to deal with all the stresses in the world, multiplied by the fact that you have to be tough and pretend like it doesn't happen to you. The same financial, the same mental health, the same family, the same addiction, the same everything, problems that we all have. And when you have those problems as a police officer, though, you're under a magnifying glass. You're under a magnifying glass and people see you and people expect you to act a certain way and act differently than other human beings. ABLE helps you to deal with those issues. ABLE helps you with respect to your partners, your coworkers, your colleagues, your fellow deputies, your fellow agents. ABLE allows you to step in, to give them a tap on the shoulder, to ask them to let you take it because you're in a better space at that moment, to prevent them from getting into trouble, to prevent them from getting hurt, prevent them from getting killed. That's what ABLE is. It is the ultimate in being the best partner that you can possibly be. And to be able to have that honest conversation, that honest interaction with that individual. And ABLE is about community. Because you come from community. You are part of community, whether you live in the district where you work or you live outside of it. If you live outside of it, you have police officers that you hope are doing ABLE as well. I've heard too many stories of officers who've been pulled over by other officers. But that community needs you at your best. That community needs your partner at his or her best. And ABLE helps to get them there. ABLE helps to make sure that when interacting with a community member and you feel that frustration, that tension, because look, people are annoying. People are frustrated. People are difficult. People don't listen. People run. But sometimes we all need and I'm in the social media world. I know what happens when people move too quickly, when people decide to just put anything out there. Well, in policing, it's not as forgiving. And you know that, and in many ways, I know that I'm preaching to a choir here. But ABLE helps you when dealing with the community, helps you to remember that just as you want them to believe that you are human and to know that you're human, that you know that they are human. That you accept them as with the faults that they have, but that you will always treat them with a level of respect and kindness that you would want someone to treat you with. Look, I went through the ABLE training, and the thing that struck me is we need ABLE for lawyers. We need ABLE for prosecutors. We need ABLE for business people. We need ABLE for pretty much everything. That's, you know, ABLE was created out of this idea of helping your fellow human being. And why don't we do it? So I don't want to claim that that only police officers need it. But I'm saying if you as police officers accept ABLE and teach ABLE and work with ABLE, that you will teach these other professions what they need to know. Look, we are in an undeniable rut right now in this country. Undeniable rut right now in this country. People don't talk to each other. People are constantly mad at each other. People won't listen to each other. Everyone thinks that everyone else hates them, thinks they're stupid. I joined this ABLE process because I actually saw a ton of hope in it. I saw it as something where we are making a positive change that isn't linked to politics, isn't linked to telling someone that their profession is a bad profession, isn't linked to telling someone that we need to defund everything that they do. It is about building. It's about building the profession to be all that it can be. It is about building the individual to be all that he or she can be. It is about building partners to be the best possible partners that they can be. That is what ABLE is to me. Because if the people who are fearless about running into a hail of bullets are equally fearless about telling a superior officer, hey Sarge, hey captain, hey chief, I got this one. If we all had that same courage, I honestly think that we, as a community, as a society, as partners, would be much better. So let me just say thank you, congratulations, thanks for listening to me, and I wish you all the absolute best.
Thank you, Mr. Murillo. So just as a recap, our department is actively undergoing the training for this very important program on the duty to intervene and how to actually do it. One of the things the chair and I also are excited about is the potential, the partnerships underway with other important stakeholders like the tech world. When we were at Noble, we had the opportunity to hear potential partnerships with Meta to introduce a virtual reality training component of this for officers to augment the training exercises and provide opportunities for officers to practice out what active bystandership actually looks like. So going beyond the theoretical, what you need to do to actually get in a few rounds of activities and doing some intervention through training. So establishing this muscle memory component, which is very important in any training. Mr. Murillo, we're going to now pivot to our data discussion. Again, we went through the policy sections about that emphasize accountability and transparency. We referenced several times that there are several reporting requirements, and we have emphasized that the Berkeley Police Department has a transparency hub would they publish and report out on this data to the community members. And we're going to revisit that. We did it the first forum. We're going to revisit it as it relates to the particular segments we talked about and the different levels of force. So, Mr. Murillo, if you want to take it away.
Of course. Thank you, Director Aguilar. Just one moment while I get my screen up and running. Okay. Again, everyone, as we covered last week, the Berkeley Police Department offers the Police Transparency Portal where they upload their stop data, calls for service, use of force, and other crime data, as well as making their data sets publicly available. In today's forum, one of the features that we'd like to bring to your attention is the fact that we could sort through the different instances that force has been used to some detail. What you currently see on your screen is the use of force data dashboard. This maps out every section or every instance of use of force, at least in the screen you're seeing here, for the last 12 months or the last year. But we have the ability to see it through last year through a year, the year to date, the last 30 days, and so forth. You could also filter it by, again, if the person was being arrested, if they were simply an involved party, if there's another party, or part of the reason why that use of force was initiated. One of the questions that was brought up in our last discussion was whether we knew how many calls for service resulted in use of force. We're currently working with the department to get that exact number for it. The reason it's not depicted here is because the call for service data doesn't necessarily report if the disposition resulted in force, and the use of force data doesn't report whether that interaction, how it was initiated. So we're working on getting that information. The second part of that question was whether how many of these instances of force resulted in complaints. And that information is, or at least up until 2023, the number of allegations received for use of force is on our annual report, which we will be linking in the chat below and is currently on our website. But to continue, one of the aspects that folks are most interested in is one, of course, the demographics of the individuals for which force is being used, as well as the level of force and the number of instances. As we see here, not only could we look at the filter by the total instances of force for the period of interest, but we could also filter it down by the levels. So again, level 1, level 2, and level 3 are the levels most commonly used by the Berkeley Police Department. To date, there hasn't been a level 4 use of force. And it breaks it down by grab as to what the most common use of force category it falls into, as we can see here. And over the last 12 months, level 1 grabs have been the most common use of force, followed by a control hold. And in terms of level 2, at 128 instances where a handgun was pointed. Again, we could break it down by the reason for the use of force, from whether it was affecting an arrest, resisting arrest, 5150 detentions, and so forth. Okay.
If I may, Mr. Murillo, I just want to highlight something. There have been level 4 use of force incidents within the last 12-month period. We have we understand that there are investigations underway. Our office doesn't have the ability to self-initiate investigations, but we do, when we receive a complaint, do investigate them. So we do have we confirmed to the community earlier, a few months back, our office will engage in a use of force level 4 investigation once the proper criminal investigations are completed. Through the charter language, we have not been able to engage in those investigations until those proper investigations are completed. So I just want to make sure we're providing that information. And one of the things that we want to also emphasize, you might be wondering, there's only 319 incidents. Why are there 1,132 users of force? And we have to understand that in one incident, there could be multiple officers, as often is the case, and each of this use of force the use of each of the use of force that's been utilized by each officer has to be documented for. So that is why you're going to see different numbers from the incidents to the total uses of force. So that's just want to provide that clarification there.
Thank you, Director Aguilar. But of course, as I mentioned, all these data sets that you see on the screen here are also available to be downloaded in a raw data format. CVS files are what's available for download, from our stop data to, again, calls for service and use of force. The use of force is currently on the website from March 2021 to the present. Okay. And I'll stop sharing for a moment. With that said, and as we touched upon earlier, one of the questions we get is in terms of how feedback can be received, and whether that be through the form of commendation in instances where an officer practiced good de-escalation or didn't use force in an instance where it wasn't necessarily required, to complaints. One of the ways that that can be reported is through our civil portal. And if you give me just a moment, I'll be able to provide a screen share. The data that you currently see on your screen is not for the city of Berkeley. What you're currently seeing is a testing environment, but this is the software that our department has recently adopted. We're currently in a data migration stage, so our data currently isn't available. But again, back to the question about whether community members are wondering how many complaints are received for use of force specifically, that data would be available in real time as we receive and accept complaints. So we just wanted to share that aspect to it. Director Aguilar, would you like to add anything else to the screen?
Mr. Moody, if you just show the drop down so what community members can filter through.
Yes. Again, the complaints by allegation is one of the many reports that could be generated by Civil and the software that we're using. You could see compliments, as I mentioned earlier, the terms of allegations for a certain amount of time, the number of complaints that have been received by an agency. Again, the complaints by allegation, if you're interested in knowing how many complaints resulted in discipline or any other outcome for an investigation, that data will be available as well by the disposition. If you're interested in particular demographics, that information is available as well.
And Mr. Murillo, I'm going to ask something in real time. I didn't ask ahead of time, but if you can start gathering our annual report, just wanted to provide another source for community members, because over here in our civil portal, you're only going to see on our dashboard the complaints that have been lodged with our office. You won't see through that particular visualization the resolution, but we do report that out, the disposition of these different events for each of the calendar years. So we do that through our annual report. We are required by the charter to provide a report out to the board and city council and the members, the community members, at these different data points. So there are going to be opportunities in the future. We're going to try to migrate and have our data all housed in one place, so you're not looking at different places. But for now, you're going to get real-time access to complaints and their allegations from our civil software, and then we're going to be reporting out on an annual basis what the disposition of the investigations were. And Mr. Murillo, do you have that so we can just show community members what that will look like?
Of course, just one moment while I get the report on the screen. Okay, so in our annual report, not only do we report it by the allegation in terms of use of force and the instances for each complaint. This particular year, because it was our inaugural report, it covered our first 3 years of operations. But one of the aspects that this report also provides is that we do provide general allegation by allegation summaries for each case that we've processed and received. So it goes through the process of our investigation, and you'll be able to know what aspects or what the general outcome was. For example, in this particular case of improper use of force, in this case, it was unfounded. Okay. You're muted, Director.
Yes, and I'll just add that this particular report that we put forth this year, it covered a 2+ period. We called it a triennial report. Now that we have gone through the transition from the 1973 Police Review Commission model to the now Office of Director of Police Accountability and Police Accountability Board model, and put out this fourth report, we're going to get back in the rhythm of the annual reports as required by the city charter. So just wanted to provide that point of clarification.
Okay. Okay, Director, if you want to go back to the slides.
Yes, and then if I can just ask you to pull up the some of these sources that I'll be discussing. Again, the use of force is regulated by different guidelines, the case law, state codes. One important source community members should know about is the post guidelines on the use of force. Mr. Murillo, could you just pull that up? Okay, so this is again publicly facing. We do have the link in the PowerPoint, which we'll be posting after we complete this. And then after we go through these different links that I'll show you today, I'll give you an opportunity to see the links. But there's also a section here on the reporting requirements. Again, the post certified agencies must comply with these. So a lot of these already codified. These standards are codified in the Berkeley Police Department policy. And this is also more information about what the training it's from post looks like. There's obviously also training that they get when they're in the academies and where they go for refresher training. That's not necessarily in this manual, but it gives you a broader idea about these different concepts that we have been discussing in these forums. Another important aspect of the law is now the post portal. We've been talking about accountability. One of the important elements of accountability is to provide access to community members when they feel like there is a deviation of policy, a violation of policy, to have avenues to address this. We understand historically, and for obvious reasons, community members may not want to go to the police department where they had a negative encounter with. For those reasons, the law, post, and other stakeholders have recognized the importance of independent avenues to file a complaint. So now Post actually accepts complaints from members of the public against California peace officers. So this is an important data point we want to provide to community members. They don't have to go directly to the police department. They interacted with, they can go through this post portal. And Mr. Murillo, if you can go to the actual complaint form, so we just let our community members see what that looks like. So this is the complaint form. An important piece at the top is that you can wish to remain anonymous and not provide contact information. The only thing is that Post will be unable to provide you with notification regarding the findings of the investigation. An important aspect of this too to understand is that Post themselves will not be conducting the investigation. If you go back, Mr. Murillo, what Post will do is take the complaint and then they will forward your complaint to the relevant department, and the department will then conduct the investigation, inform Post of its findings. What Post can do, which is I think very important as well, is to determine if there's an issue regarding the certification. So it might be the case that a department finds that there was no violation of policy or law, but there might be an element of it that may still be reviewed for potential decertification. There's certain principles that post certification ensures in terms of fairness and in being impartial in the process, and a lot of important attributes that police and peace officers are expected to uphold. And there is an opportunity potentially for polls to determine if an officer needs to be decertified in cases of serious misconduct. So that's important to note. Mr. Murillo, if we can also pivot back to the Berkeley Police Department website. So again, another avenue is going directly to the police department. If you don't go to post, you go directly to the police department to file a complaint. Most departments have an ability and opportunity to lodge a complaint. In the Berkeley Police Department, we have this web page where you can not only file commendations but also file complaints. And each officer also does have a card with a QR code that would also lead you to this. So you don't have to necessarily remember this website, but it is important to know that that you have an avenue directly through the Berkeley Police Department. If you can click on the complaint form to get our community members familiar with it that may not be. Okay, so this is currently a format, the Berkeley Police Department civilian complaint form. And it's a PDF on the website. You can download it. You can submit it to their office. You can also make complaints anonymous. However, they also indicate that not providing your name and contact may affect the department's ability to conduct a full investigation and provide the result of the complaint. They also do provide the office director of police accountability information there, which we're going to go to shortly. But this is just what the form looks like. If you go to the second page. Okay, this is an opportunity for you to make your statement and sign it. I do want to also make sure I'm notating this paragraph here. This advisement, you have the right to make a complaint against a police officer for any improper police conduct. California law requires this agency to have a procedure to investigate civilian complaints. You have the right to a written description of the procedure. This agency may find after investigation that there's not enough evidence to warrant action on your complaint. Even if that's the case, you have the right to make a complaint and have it investigated if you believe an officer behaved improperly. Civilian complaints and any reports or findings related to complaints must be retained by this agency for at least 5 years. Okay, so this is important language for your community members to be aware of. One other aspect, if you go back, Mr. Murillo, to the website. Again, they provide external resources as well. And they have the ACLU page about knowing your rights, which is important for community members. Community members should also be aware that they're not required to necessarily know all the policies and all the aspects of the policies. Our recommendation is if you feel that you had a negative encounter and you believe that the department may have acted inappropriate, to share your concerns, and it'll be up to the investigators to investigate that, match it along the policies, state law, and any relevant case law. But we don't want community members to feel like they need to be well versed in exactly the policies to file a complaint. If you have a negative encounter and a positive one, it is important that you communicate that information out. If it's a negative encounter, we need to ensure that officers are corrected and an appropriate disciplinary actions taken if it's a clear violation of law or policy. But also if there's an aspect of the interaction that was positive and you want to provide a commendation, that is also a good opportunity to ensure that we have the policing interactions that we want to see in our community. And then if we can also pivot, Mr. Murillo, to our complaint process. Again, Mr. Murillo went over our complaint software, Civil. You can file, if you click that, complete the online form, it'll take you to Civil, where you would then get the opportunity to click one of those boxes: complaint form, compliment form, a contestation form, or police practice procedure form. I'll take some time right now to just provide a little explanation about these other two that we haven't discussed in this forum yet. A contestation form, and it's important as it relates to the internal affairs process. When a community member files a complaint with internal affairs, uh, under the current policies in law, the police department is not required to provide that information and that notification to the Police Accountability Board or the Office of Director of Police Accountability. So if you file your complaint, which is your right and your prerogative to file directly with the police department, and or if you go through post, our office and or the board may not hear about it. But in that case, if you are dissatisfied with your internal affairs investigation, which the department will provide a findings letter or closure letter or disposition letter, which will tell you that they concluded their investigation, what the findings were. Under the city charter, you are able to contest the chief's findings, and that would allow the opportunity for the board to be able to review that internal affairs investigation and ensure that it was thorough, accurate, impartial. And so that is an opportunity to get oversight if a community member goes directly with the police department and does not file a separate complaint with our office. Another important element of this, we're talking about policies, practice, and procedures. That is also an important um, function of the board, which we have emphasized in our first forum, and we'll bring it back up again. If community members feel like there's a deficiency in the policy, practice, or procedure, which is why we're having these discussions to elicit any feedback. If there is such a sentiment, community members can request that the board looks into it and review it. So you can request a review. The board also, though, has the opportunity to conduct their own or self-initiated review. And sometimes our office, when we come across patterns, practices, or potentially through our investigation, gaps in policies, we often inform the board in a public way that this is perhaps an area that should be looked at more closely and potentially recommend for the board to undertake a policy, practice, or procedure review. In some instances that has happened, and all these scenarios have happened. We have routinely received policy or practice procedure requests from members of the community. The board has proactively engaged in these affairs, and also our office has brought forth things for the board to consider looking at more closely. And also in terms of the division of labor, the standing regulations that the board currently operates under, they have the ability to undertake a policy review as a full board. They will do that in their board meetings or have special meetings. They can also delegate that to a particular board member. They can also ask the office to engage in some background investigation and submit its findings to the board for full review. So all these different mechanisms and tools have been utilized depending on the caseload of the board and the workload of the board at any given time. And sometimes it strategically make more sense for one of the avenues than the other. To give an example, we have a very well-versed and talented group of board members that have different life backgrounds and experiences. We have had individuals had a former dispatcher management background, and we have had instances where there might be a nexus in policy practice with dispatch, and that board member may take the initial review and present the findings to the board. Just an example of how these things play out in real time. Mr. Murillo, if did we go over the tracking of the case number here?
We covered it briefly in the previous meeting, in the
Okay.
previous one.
Okay, so that's one thing that we often get questions about. If you can see, we have a track your case feature there through the system. Community members, if you file your complaint here, you can fill out the information in your email address, and it would also provide a tracking case number, which then you can come back, enter your tracking number, and look at what the status is. So that's just an important piece of information for our community members. Okay. Okay. And as I promised, I'll go ahead and get back on the slide. So we have an opportunity if anybody wants to take a screenshot of our um, uh, of our PowerPoint that has those links. We can do that now. While I'm doing that, Mr. Murillo, are there any questions that we can be addressing now, or that we should be addressing?
My apologies, I was muted. We do have a few questions. Some of these we'll be able to address after the forum. Just generally speaking, there is a question about civil and language accessibility and whether it's available in other language. The answer to that is yes, it is available in other languages. At the bottom right corner, it's actually synced with Google Translate. And Google Translate's able, whatever's offered on Google Translate, our webpage could be translated with.
We could just go back to that and just demonstrate that?
Yes, one moment. Okay. So that feature could be found at the bottom right corner here, and I'll just zoom in here for a sec. And it'll let you select which languages you want the screen in. So for example, if we wanted French, it will do it in French.
Excellent. Let me go back to the screen sharing. Okay. And are there any other questions that we can answer in real time?
We have other additional questions that are a bit more specific. And we could follow up individually later or provide more additional context on, particularly in providing statistics or case updates. So we could address those on the side.
Okay, and shortly we will have a public comment. So if you have dropped a question in there and you want to also share it there, we can also provide any updates that may be available at this time. Okay, so is that it, Mr. Murillo?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So now, just wanted to again reflect on accountability and the transparency measures that we currently have in the city of Berkeley. We talked about both internal and external mechanisms for accountability and transparency. The department policies currently and practices and procedures do require immediate notification and documentation of use of force as defined by their policies. So that those are internal mechanisms. They also do require that supervisors, when a use of force is reported, to conduct investigations if it meets one of the thresholds of the different levels of force, 1, 2, 3, or 4. We also discuss the external avenues of accountability, like POST, like the Police Accountability Board, or the Office of Director of Police Accountability, which are all external to the police department and can provide varying degrees and levels of investigation and review of some of these incidents. There's also important transparency measures. Excuse me, let me take a step back. We also went over through the ABLE program that the police department is going to be engaging in or actively getting trained towards. And that's going to ensure that we go beyond policy and we go into culture elements of our police force. And we're ensuring that the police departments feel empowered to intervene and all use of force encounters that may be excessive in nature or where there might be a deviation from policy, and also to intervene in other degrees of deviation of policies. One of the things that the chair Chair Moore and I we wanted emphasized when we attended the Noble Conference that the presenters talk about intervention in other situations where it's not use of force, and they have informed us, the departments that have participated, and also the trainers and the organizers of these training, that they're actively addressing situations that aren't just use of force. So it's really establishing a culture of accountability and being able to intervene at all levels. So it's not just a supervisor telling a subordinate, hey, you're doing something wrong or inappropriate out of policy. It can also be the other way around. It could be a line officer saying, hey, Sergeant, let me step in. Hey, Sergeant, just a reminder, or empowering them with tools to be able to intervene in real time. And transparency, the department has a transparency hub where data is put out. There is also RIPA data that is put out by the state of California, and then our office is actively working towards making these encounters, interactions, and complaining about these interactions and incidents more transparent. We talked about our civil data portal and dashboard. We're also trying to make sure that we're identifying the areas of interest that community members may want to see in our annual reporting. So we're identifying that, and we're growing with our community discussions and direction from the board about what the community may want to see in these annual report outs. And the goal here is to try to improve the community trust in our oversight system and in our police department. We're going to also just highlight that there are improvements to transparency that can be made. Our office has made some recommendations. We'll be going to council in a few weeks to talk about some of the recommendations. The board is also making some recommendations to strengthen transparency and accountability, and how we can make this department as whole, not just in use of force data, but in all other elements as well, more transparent. Mr. Murillo, did you have any thoughts or anything that you wanted to include before we open it up to public comments?
Sorry, my mute was engaged. No, Director, I think we've covered the points that we've needed to cover in terms of this policy. But again, if there's any questions regarding the data portal, we will be providing our information in one of our later slides. If there's any questions that might have not been addressed in terms of data, or even how some of these instances are reviewed, we're more than happy to have a conversation with you. Just feel free to reach out. But Director, if I may, at this time, if we have any public comment, we're more than happy to take that now. Okay, and we could just go ahead and use the raise hand feature if you'd like to provide public comment. If you're watching the recording of this, you're also more than welcome to send in your questions via email, and we'll be more than happy to address them. Director, at this time, I do not see any hands raised.
Okay, and I'll also re-emphasize if there were any particular questions put in the Q&A that we haven't answered, we will follow up with committee members. If there were some that might have been very specific in nature, we are staying away from not providing accurate information. So we want to make sure that if it's something that we can't respond to in real time, we'll at least follow up. As a great example was the question that was brought forth in our last forum, and then we followed up in this one. So those are the type of questions that we'll be able to follow up and provide the most accurate response we can. A gentle reminder about our makeup. We went over this in our last forum. This is the makeup of the Police Accountability Board and the Office of Director of Police Accountability. We also do just want to emphasize, we understand that some of these interactions could be difficult to discuss. We have launched what is believed to be the first in our field, civilian oversight therapy dog program. So we do have Lucky available. It's our mixed lab Cocker Spaniel, Chocolate. If you're a dog lover, he's available for our community members who would like some support. We also do take him out and interact with community members. We have received a lot of positive feedback in our interactions, and we'll continue to strengthen that program. And if you want to get in touch with us, here is our contact information. And we also encourage you to get in contact with us. We are currently in a temporary location. You'll see the 1947 address. We list that out because sometimes community members, it's easier for them to get to that location. Our temporary location, which is right above the Ace Hardware store, located above 2020 Milvia Street, Suite 250. But if you do want to get in touch with us in person, feel free to contact us. We can definitely meet you in person if during the hours of operation, or if you want to come outside of our hours or meet you where you're at. Please don't hesitate to bring forth your concerns or ways that we can strengthen our systems. Before we close, so I do want to remind some community members about something we mentioned last time. The conversation doesn't end here. So we've been tasked by the Police Accountability Board to conduct an initial review of the use of force policy. We are actively engaging in that. To strengthen that review, we have also received and are looking at particular incidents of use of force that have been brought to our attention. And they will, when we conduct we produce our report to the board, we will also provide an analysis of those events and how they interact with the current policies and whether they demonstrate gaps in the policies or recommendations to bring forth. So if you have brought something to our attention, don't feel like it's being forgotten. It is part of the overall project of doing this a review. We're providing these forums as a way to inform community members about what's in the policy. We're also considering events of use of force that have been brought to our attention that may potentially be reviewed when the board meets with the Police Accountability Board. So again, don't feel like the conversation stops here at the use of force forum. There's a third installation. We will make sure that we circulate the information, provide community members with the opportunity to attend. If you have any additional questions or comments after today's forum, please feel free to reach out to us. Our contact information, again, is provided here, and we encourage you to stay engaged with the ODPA and PAB. The PAB, is back in session this week on September 11th. They're having their next meeting. Those meetings are hybrid, so they're physically located on 2020 Milvia Street, our temporary location I just mentioned. We do have Zoom links available, if you want to participate remotely. So please feel free to come to those meetings. And thank you again for your participation, for your commitment to police accountability in our community. Have a good night.